Okay, we're going to move to the next stage. Ann was kind of setting up nationally, gave us some, I think, good perspective nationally what's going on. We're going to actually have the opinion page editor from the Herald Tribune and my friend Tom Tryon will now lead our fellows through kind of a state discussion, some of the cool things happening in their states and their work. I do want to point out, because I know she has to leave soon, Maggie Clark here in the front, who is with the Herald Tribune, is doing a great, I hope you're following it, story on Medicaid that in the state of Florida. I will not critique Medicaid in Florida. I will just say that Maggie's doing some great writing about it. And there's a survey that's gone out to the Pediatrician Association of Florida, and we'll have some real data back soon talking about Medicaid challenges in our state. Was that framed well? So thank you, Maggie, for that work. I hope you're following that on the Herald Tribune. You can follow her on Twitter also, those of you that are tweeting, and there are a lot of you doing that. So thank you very much. The bios are again in the book. All of these people are amazing. I know each one of them personally and got to know them better over the last few years. This is an amazing group, and Tom Tryon will now lead us in a conversation with those folks.
Thank you, Mr. John Annis. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Bill, the last time I was in this building, I was 11 years old. We made the trip from the Palmetto Boys Club all the way down to Sarasota and played in an indoor gym, which was actually quite unique. We did not have an indoor gym at the time at the Palmetto Club, but I do say the Palmetto Club helped save my life as well. And it taught me I did not have a future in basketball as well, unlike one of our panelists. And I also do want to say, just very quickly, that I'm proud to work for the Herald Tribune because that organization enables me and Maggie and our other staff to write about issues like this. And I can tell you, not every news organization does that. So I hope you all will find the time next time you see our publisher or other top editors to thank them for that. All right, we're going to do what I like to do in these kinds of things. We do a little lightning round. Very quick answers, just a couple things real quick. And we'll just start with William. And we're going to do this on a first name basis and no titles. All right, first job.
My first job, I worked at a bowling alley in Brownsville, Texas. So I started as a pin chaser, and then I worked as a mechanic in the back.
Nice. Ann?
Babysitter.
Babysitter. All right. Aisha?
First job, I worked at my family's convenience store in Canton, Mississippi.
All right. Neil?
First job, I shoveled snow off of driveways, which partly explains why I live here now.
I worked at the Western Auto in Palmetto and drove a delivery truck at 14 without a driver's license. Oh. What book are you currently reading, Neil?
I'm reading The Revenant.
All right. Aisha?
Destiny by Bishop T.D. Jakes.
Ann?
I'm reading Hearts in Atlantis by Stephen King.
Nice.
I'm currently reading The Four Disciplines of Execution.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
focus on the wildly important.
All right. I'm reading the sports book. William, when you had the least money in your life, what did you learn?
I learned that education was more powerful than ever. Because when I had the least money, I was working full-time, and my undergraduate degree was suffering, and that's when I realized I needed to focus on finishing my degree.
Right. Ann?
I learned the importance of digging deep into places that you don't quite know exist when you're ready to give up, and that kind of perseverance really can serve you well.
Right. Aish?
I learned the importance of the village and how as long as you have people, you're always going to be okay if you have access to the support services, the village to keep you grounded, to keep you fed, and to keep you sheltered.
All right, thanks. Neil?
I learned the value of quarters. It was in college, and if I had quarters, I could do laundry, and if I had my laundry done, I still felt wholesome and proud about who I was.
Very good.
Good. All right. Well, thank you very much. So we're going to start with Ann, who works in the public sector, and so ask you to tell us a little bit about how the private sector and citizens can consider government as a partner in championing two-generation work.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's a pleasure to serve you today as I represent the state of Utah, our Department of Human Services. And the conviction that we have in the state of Utah is very honestly a common sense approach that I believe will resonate with those of you representing your community today. And an understanding that children and families and individuals don't come in the pieces and parts that all too often are siloed, eligibility-based, government bureaucracies want to categorize them in, but rather appreciate that it is, as we've had highlighted from Ann already this morning, an understanding of the power of proactive partnership, preventative risk-taking. Now, too frequently we believe that bureaucracy is rigid and is rules-driven and is limited by our funding regulations. But what we've recognized in the state of Utah is that if we approach service delivery with a coordinated model of care, it's just so simple, as Ann's daughter said, but a model of care, then that's an understanding of the multi-sector value that the nonprofit community, our for-profit partners, and the public sector can come together for sustainable solutions at the most local level. And we are guided by a belief, a conviction in the state of Utah that children, youth, families, and individuals are best served in their homes, schools, and communities. So you have the framework here for the same results that we're realizing in the state of Utah, which is to interrupt the intergenerational cycle of poverty by solutions that are about service delivery in the home, school, and community, together, government and the private sector as well.
Thanks. Since this is a two-generation thing, don't you want to say hi to your mama back there?
Thanks. Hi, Mom. So,
That's Kathy Silverburg,
Kathy
a former
Silverburg.
colleague, and who writes a column for the Herald Tribune, a pretty good one at that. Give us the best example of where you've used two-generation to drive policy, outcomes, program, whatever, just the strongest.
Outstanding. So right now in Utah County, within the state of Utah, 20 families are being served through a system of care approach, this model that I'm sharing. And so youth who came to our attention because of truancy, youth who are coming to our attention struggling with mental illness, with behaviors that are putting their younger siblings at risk. Historically, the government would what? Remove that child from the home, place that child in a residential facility, remove that child from their school, while the parents also grapple with their ability to stay at work and get the younger children cared for as well. But together, in partnership with the faith community, the nonprofit sector, what government is doing is surrounding that family, youth, and siblings with services so that he can stay in his school, live at home, and thrive with the family unit intact as well. It's an incredible experience that I'm happy to share more details about. Thank you.
So tell us how you persuade, convince policymakers
Absolutely.
to let you do that kind of thing.
Results, data, and outcomes. So for the same amount of money that we spend a year for a child to be cared for in a residential facility, I can serve 33 families for the cost of one child served outside of his home. I can support that family with the wraparound services, the transportation services, the counseling and interventions, the educational supports. That return on investment our lawmakers can't deny.
All right, so one more question for you right now. We hear a lot of talk about strategic this, strategic that, investment, strategic that. When you think about being strategic, how does that play out in real terms when you're spending money, when you're doing programs?
Discipline and intentionality, to be as candid as I'm being here. Is it in their home, in their school, in their community? Is the parent voice being listened to? It's not about doing to people. It is working with individuals, and not to let up on that. Not to let the rules get in the way when they're nonsensical because they're dividing families. To be absolutely unforgiving in our desire to listen to the family voice and to assure that the services are being delivered at the most local level possible with accountability for results.
Great, thank you. All right. Aisha, the wordsmith. She makes up words. So tell us what Springboard is for people who aren't familiar.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure most of you all are not familiar with Springboard. So Springboard to Opportunities is a nonprofit based in Mississippi. But even though we are based in Mississippi, I don't want you to limit your ideas about our organization to only Mississippi, because we are a movement. We are working to change the narrative around how families that live in public housing, federally subsidized affordable housing, are supported. Really empowering families to tell their own story and to be their own change. And we work with them and helping them to change their lives, their school atmosphere, and their work. And so, Springboard got started. I had to have the fabulous opportunity of being the founding executive director of Springboard. And when we started Springboard 3 years ago this June, it really was with conversation. We pride ourselves on being radically resident driven, as you heard Ann say earlier, and that's just not our tagline. It truly is our mission. We understand the danger of a single story. And when we started 3 years ago, we realized that the story that was being told about families that live in extreme poverty is not the story that they tell about themselves. And so typically when you think of individuals who live, and if we're honest with ourselves, when we typically think about individuals who live in public housing, we think that they choose to live there. We tell ourselves that they are lazy. We tell ourselves that they are milking the system, and that's not the narrative. That's not how they see themselves. They are families. They are hardworking families. They are single mothers. They are single fathers. They are kids who are really working to survive in a system that is not always survivable, if we're being truly honest. And so Springboard, we come in and we're their social capital. We work on site in those communities. We are a resident service provider, but that is only the box that we have been placed in because the system has not yet caught up to the fabulousness that is our organization. See, I just made, I almost made up a word for you, Tom. But only because they've not caught up with, truly the innovation that is the organization that I have the esteemed honor of running, because it really is supporting families in place using affordable housing as an incubator. I call us all the time and I tell my staff that we are a strategic experiment. We really are very intentional about how we work with families, the conversations that we have with families, and the narrative, as Charlotte was saying earlier, about how do we go about communicating the narrative that we put out to the media and to the mainstream public about the work that we do. So the work that I have the honor of leading is just not about the 5,000 families that my organization touches, but it is about the 2 million individuals that live in public housing. It is about the other 4 million individuals who hold vouchers for public housing, and it's about their 800,000 plus children who live in that space. Really, how do we use this moment in time to begin to have some authentic conversations about families that live in these spaces, and how do we use the power of our platforms to help those families truly live the best lives that they are entitled to live?
So if you would give us your favorite example of where this radically resident-driven, I'm not Elmer Fudd, radically, when did that change something? Give us an example of where a resident said something and it changed things.
Okay, no, I can give you a couple of examples, but I will try to follow instructions and give you one, which I do every now and then. So, one of the prime examples of families being engaged in a process and us seeing programming and policy coming together, and sometimes how policy can get in the way. So we have a fabulous program called Cash for Caps that we executed about 1.5 years ago. And it really is where we give moms a small stipend to continue their community college education. It's a program that our mothers asked for specifically. They wanted opportunities to go back to school. And in Mississippi and throughout the nation, I think that we are probably at a very precarious place with for-profit community colleges. So we have a lot of moms who had gotten into trouble with those institutions. And so we were working to address that issue. And so we had a mom who we had been working with who had been trying to get out of community college for 7 years. So a 2-year degree she had been working on for 7 years. And so through our wraparound support that we were able to give to not only her and her family, we got her out of school in 8 months. And it was less about the funding, because it was only $500 to pay for things that Pell Grants typically don't pay for. It really was the one-on-one support that she was able to receive from our staff, working with her to outline a plan and to work over the bumps when those bumps happened. And so, we had this funding, which I said was only $500, which is not a lot of money, but out of the 20 mothers that we have been working with for the last year and a half, only about half of those have used the entire $500, because it's not about the money. It really is about the access to the network and the social capital, and to having someone to listen to your needs and to be responsive to those needs that you've outlined for yourself.
Since you were so disciplined, I'll give you one more question here.
Now I'm gonna go rogue.
Give us a couple examples of public housing rules that get in the way. One or two.
Oh, Tom.
Three.
Tom is trying to make me not behave because he saw the preview last night of how I can misbehave. So a couple of rules, a couple of examples of rules getting in the way really just relates to whether or not you are eligible to have a savings account if you live in public housing. So whether or not you can earn income, whether, what happens when you actually get a job and begin to move towards more economic stability, what happens there? Whether or not the father of your child can live with you, whether or not he has a record, it's just a ton. It's a plethora of policies and programs that get in the way when we're talking about affordable housing. So, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Mm-hmm. So we'll shift to Neil. For those who don't know, Neil, describe the Visible Men Academy, including what the name means and the demographics of your pupils.
Sure, thank you, Tom. Visible Men Academy, we are kindergarten through 8th grade all-boys charter school in Bradenton in the Manatee County, just north. We're currently serving grades kindergarten through 5, and we'll work our way up to K-8. We are all boys and almost exclusively, with the exception of one student, our boys qualify for free and reduced meals. So we are as Title I gets, in many ways by design. This is the demographic that we have set out to serve. Visible Men, our concept of visibility, the name of Visible Men as an organization really is spawned from what I think is one of the most incredible literary works of our country's time, Invisible Man, by Ralph Ellison. In the late 50s, he wrote, and the protagonist in that story, a black man trying to find his way through hundreds of pages, he remains nameless for the entire book, which is really the ultimate in invisibility. And our approach is that while there are a lot of negative and tragic statistics associated with the realities of our boys and their families, there's another side to that story, which is what's working, what's going well, what are the assets on which we can build. And when you come to our school, when you learn about our school, we are a SHINE community, and SHINE is an acronym for our core values. The S is selflessness, the H, honesty, the I, integrity, the N, niceness, and the E, excellence. And we are a light theme, let your light shine. We call our boys sons, S-U-N-S. Everything we do is about this notion of light and levity and visibility to try to flip the narrative, because one thing we are absolutely convinced of, and you used the word conviction, our conviction is that our boys will be successful because of who they are, not in spite of who they are.
All right, thank you. So you've said that VMA, Visible Men Academy, is a 2-gen community school. What does that mean?
So first, if I don't heed Charlotte's tapping me on the shoulder to say we are a free school, tuition free, that is as a charter school. Charlotte, I got that in there, so thank you. We, a 2-gen community school. Well, first, the 2-gen model, as you've learned about and will continue to learn about over the course of this event, our belief in not just the value, not just the importance, but as we sit, the necessity of connecting our boys' experiences with their families, and for the outcomes we are seeking and we're committed to achieving, we just believe it's indispensable that we have to involve families in the lives, in the school lives of their boys, so that this becomes much more than isolated events of success or incidents of success. That what we really want to do is create an environment at our school and beyond where our boys can thrive, and we feel that the best way to do that is through a two-gen lens. The community school part of it is that the services we provide through our Parent Success Program, through all of the two-gen orientation, we as a school are not, nor will ever be, sufficiently staffed to deliver all of these services and all of these programs. But if you look around our community, you see these wonderful social service agencies who provide the absolute necessary work for our families, again, that we're not equipped to provide, but if we engage in partnerships and develop these relationships, they absolutely are equipped to provide them. And so we have a very robust partnership model, and we believe in these agencies within the community that can provide these programs. That's the community part of it, is we really, really want to tap into and access the assets of the community far beyond whatever we would be able to deliver on our own.
What do the families and your students need most?
Wow. So, among many reasons for the crisis that we see, we think first on the list is low expectations. So our boys and our families need an environment where much is expected of them. We think that's the first thing. And when you create an environment, we believe expectations drive behavior. And when you create an environment where you are deliberately informing people of their value, of their worth, as that sinks in, their conduct, their behavior, their aspirations elevate. And so we think first and foremost, they need us to expect much of them. In addition to that, they need, and I love hearing how often this comes up just in the short time that we've been here this morning, they need an atmosphere that values their voice. So rather than saying, this is what you need, we're going to do this, you're going to come, involve them in the process of having them identify and articulate their needs, so that they are immediately invested in the process, and so that a pipeline of trust is immediately established. I mean, we hear all the time, we have an event in just a couple of hours, and I'm sure the question will come up in some way, shape, or form, this idea of, are your parents involved? You know, what's your parent involvement like? And for us, it's just amazing, because from the moment that a family enrolls their boy at our school, they are engaged. From the very moment they've made that decision to send their son or their grandson or their nephew to our school. So we need to look at that as a really positive thing, and that's the beginning of parent engagement. So in an atmosphere where their voice is valued, and particularly because we know that the overwhelming majority of our parents didn't have parents who were significantly involved in their school lives, one, and two, likely didn't have a very positive school experience themselves, it's incumbent upon us to create an environment where they really trust the institution of school. And that takes the work, and that also takes asking them what their needs are.
Great. Thank you, Neil. We'll shift over to William really quickly. And why don't you tell us a little bit about El Paso County El Paso County Community College?
Yeah, that's the official name of El Paso Community
All right.
College is what we go by.
And particularly the 70% number.
Sure, absolutely. First and foremost, let me thank John Annis for having us, Community Foundations of Sarasota, Florida. What an amazing event. To be privileged to be a part of this and to look out in the audience and to see so many faces that are committed to making this region, this state, and ultimately this nation better is heartening. I truly cannot thank you all enough for your commitment. It's obvious that you want to make this region better, and I certainly appreciate being a part of it. You know, El Paso Community College was created in 1969. We opened for classes in 1971. Have just under 30,000 students, fall credit students, 5 campuses throughout the greater El Paso region. And what drives me every day is our census data, and that's what I look at every July when it comes out, and I look at the percentages, unfortunately some of the percentages that are disheartening and some of the percentages that are getting better, and it drives me. It's job security without a doubt. So we serve those students. El Paso County is 833,000 people, 85% Hispanic. We earn, on average, 77 cents for every dollar that's earned in Texas and 75 cents for every dollar that's earned in the United States. 23.3% of our population lives under the poverty level. And so what we see is we have an inherent responsibility to increase the educational attainment level for our region. And so what we see is 70% of our first-time in college students are first-generation college students. And so how do you get to that second generation when you're still working with 70% that this is their first exposure to college? They have no clue what the college system is about, much as my colleague Aisha said. There's so much more to college readiness than cut scores. It's understanding the system of higher ed, it's understanding the resources, and understanding the culture of who we serve, who inherently, when you have that large of a Latino population, do not like to ask for help. And so we have to change that narrative and explain that we're also good stewards of our dollars. So you're not asking for help, you paid for these services. Make sure that you utilize the services that are available to you. And much like Neil said, I love that, I have yet to see a student rise to low expectations. I have such high expectations for the students that we serve by providing them the support they need outside of the classroom.
How do you get those first-generation students in the door? Literally, how do you get them in the door?
You know, it really begins, and so a preview to the workshops that Dr. Kingsley and I will be leading tomorrow afternoon, or tomorrow morning rather. It really begins, so went to a conference in DC, and Ann will know Katie Haycock well at Ed Trust. I'm a huge believer in the CASE method. Copy and steal everything and give them credit. So Katie had a session where a principal and a counselor from an elementary school in San Antonio, Texas, were talking about what they were trying to do to create a college-going culture. Katie has a poster that sits prominently in my office that says, "College begins in kindergarten." And honestly, the pre-K folks that are here, it begins in pre-K, but until we have pre-K for all, it begins in kindergarten. You have to set that expectation for those students immediately. That the expectation, my son, my little one is in kindergarten. He has no idea that his teacher has to have a bachelor's degree to be his kindergarten teacher. And so we have to set that expectation. We have to be able to understand and plant that seed. I'm sure Neil and his school is absolutely doing that. The expectation is that all children will go to college. And so that's where it begins in pre-K and K through 12 to deliver that expectation. The number one influencer of students going to college is their parents. And what we are told is that parents, 100% of the parents participate in K through 5. By the time middle school comes around, we're lucky if we get about half of the parents. And then in high school, we're looking at 15 to 20%. And so what do we do in higher ed? We wait till they're in high school to recruit them. We need them to understand the expectation is that they will go to college beginning in kindergarten.
So I suspect that you've had some students say, "Hey, you got a nice suit, you got a tie, you're a fellow. What do you know about my experience?"
You know, the single voice is so important, you know, and so last night's dinner was amazing. And yet that's a dinner that you have I personally have the imposter feeling. That's not what I'm from or come from. You know, the expectations were not as such for me. So I was raised by a single mom. I'm a first-generation college student. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. Mom remarried when I was a junior in high school, and they said, we want you to go to college because we don't want you to work as hard as we have to work to make ends meet. Now, there's days, in particular board meeting days, that I feel like I've worked pretty hard. But it doesn't compare to the 38 years that my stepfather has worked for AT&T as a technician outside in similar humidity and heat to Sarasota down in Brownsville, Texas. And so that living up to the expectations that my parents set forth and being that first-generation student, I completely relate to the students that we serve because I am the students that we serve.
All right, one more question for you before we kind of have a little free-for-all. Texas, like Florida, has a diverse population, but is generally led by conservative whites, many of whom are not big on public spending. How do you attempt to persuade state leaders to invest in minority and low-income students? You
know, my colleague Ann talked about data. The data is clear. Now, I am a huge connoisseur of the data. I look at the data at our institution, I look at the data on a state level and actually on a national level, and the data is overwhelming with regards to what we need to do. That population in Texas, by far the fastest growing population, the minority majority population, is the future of the state. And folks in this room obviously understand that's the future of this state as well. If we don't invest in the population that's coming up, regardless of the ethnicity or race of the population, but more importantly, that it's the future of our state. You know, someday, there's a lot of selfishness in what I speak to. Someday, I have a 5-year-old, so in about 21 or 2 years, when I decide to retire, there has to be somebody that is funding the retirement system that I am going to be utilized when I retire. So it's so self-serving in that I want to ensure that we have that population that is able to step into leadership roles and to move our state forward. The future of Texas is clear. Texas has a very aggressive form. By the way, Texas and Florida, wonderful rivalry at times, incredible incredible admiration for each other as well. Belle Whelan is the president of SACS. Dr. Whelan would say that whenever Governor Perry sneezed, Governor Scott caught a cold. We have a lot of similarities in what we're trying to do in our states, now Governor Abbott, but still Governor Scott. We have a very aggressive plan in Texas, 60 by 30 Texas. Higher education strategic plan to take us from 2015 to 2030, and the essential of the plan is that by 60% of 25 to 34-year-olds by 2030 will have a market-valued post-secondary education credential. We're at 38% right now. That is, it's an incredible stretch. But the reason is all of the data shows us so clearly that all of the jobs, new jobs, and by 2030, 65% of all jobs will require some post-secondary education and training. So we have a responsibility at our community college, one of the 50 in Texas, to do our part to help meet those goals of 60 by 30 Texas. The economic prosperity and future of our state depends on it.
Great, thank you. All right, so we're going to jump around a little bit. Ann, you're at the top of your big organization. How do you ensure that policies set at the statewide level actually work?
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, first, get out there and witness it. I would never know if I remained in an office in the state capital of Salt Lake City. And so, community by community, actually the lieutenant governor with another cabinet official and I and some of our staff will be traveling in the months of May and June to the 10 most rural communities of the state of Utah that also correlate to the highest degree of poverty, of youth living in poverty. So our school-age youth in those communities, when we sit down with the community themselves, the school principals, the public health, the counselors, and the parents, the families themselves, and listen. And then furthermore, how I know whether or not the policies work is on a monthly basis, we randomly select 10 clinical cases, if you will, the children who are demanding the most from our system relative to juvenile justice, child welfare, mental health and substance use disorders, and developmental disabilities. And we evaluate how long have they received our services. Are our services making a difference? Ann Mosley revealed the kernel of truth relative to big bureaucracy and systems, and how do we know if our policies are working? Stop doing what doesn't work. Stop doing it. Ask yourself, why are we struggling with this child and family and this circumstance that didn't work for the 10 children and families who came with the exact same presenting challenges before? Stop it. Stop funding it. Stop authorizing it. Tell the caseworker directly that this is a practice not to continue anymore.
All right, thank you.
Be honest.
So I'll toss this out. Credible research in our region indicates that most low-income jobs pay on par with state averages, yet the cost of housing is above average. A report last year by the Florida United Ways found that 13% of Manatee households, 11% of Sarasota County households fall beneath the poverty line, and then an additional 30% in addition of households in both counties experience severe financial strain despite being active in the workforce. That's the ALICE report, Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed Families. So that suggests that there is a serious problem that even people are working. I think we all know retail, restaurant jobs aren't going away. What do we as a community, as society, what do we have to do to enable those folks to pay their bills, succeed, and have generational success? It's open.
It's real easy. Pay them a living wage. Oh.
Yeah.
I think that's easy. I think it's an easy answer and not an easy way to get to that answer. We have to begin to pay families the living wage. And we know that currently the minimum wage standard within this country does not allow you to do everything that you just read in your statistics, Tom, which is to, pay your rent, pay your expenses as it relates to food and health care and electricity, and then getting to the quality of life things, so the extra exposures that we all would like for our children and our families to have access to. So we really have to begin to pay families the living wage. And for families who live in a system of affordable housing, we have to allow them to be paid a living wage. And then we have to allow them to capture those increases in wages in a way that they can earn that income and that it doesn't automatically affect their rent. So recently, HUD, for those, I'm going to tread lightly down this rabbit hole and not get too deep into the weeds, because I know this afternoon we'll be talking more about affordable housing. But HUD recently allocated where the Family Self-Sufficiency, FSS, which allows families that live in affordable housing to whatever income increases that they have to actually put that in the escrow account. So for the first time, HUD is allowing that to be captured for families that live in not just communities that are ran by housing authorities, but also for communities that are owned by private developers and nonprofit developers. And that's a really big deal. So you're allowing families for the first time to really have a reason to, it's an incentive for families to really get those jobs that pay the wage that they'll need to get to stability, and then from stability to ending the cycle of poverty.
Anybody else? What do we have to do?
From my perspective, I'm in the field that I'm in because I believe in education, and the data supports it. The more you learn, the more you earn, and the less likely you are to be unemployed. You're a better citizen, you contribute to the economy, you're less likely to utilize social services. If we set the expectation and then provide the support to invest in themselves, to get an education. It doesn't mean everyone needs to get a doctorate. It doesn't mean everyone needs to get a baccalaureate degree. Certificates that have a market value, associate's degree that gets you into the field at a living wage is part of what all of our communities have to do. We have to increase the educational attainment level of our regions in order to increase the quality of life.
All right. Yes. All right, I'm going to give you each a minute to close, inspire, make up new words. and then we'll shift to questions and answers and be done almost on time. Neil?
Yeah, I always feel like it comes back to this issue of the inherent value of human life. And I say that because if we start from that place, it will tend to guide us in the right direction in terms of the activity and the programming and the initiatives and all of those things. I have to tell you, I mean, our school, as any school, has its challenges. We have our challenges around, you name it. I mean, we're a kindergarten through 5 school with 110, 115 boys running around every day. You can imagine some of the challenges we have. But what I will tell you is we set out to create a school that had a simple goal from the outset, which was to have our boys love school. We wanted our boys to have a strong connection to the experience of school, because if we couldn't start with that, then any attempt at learning gains and accelerated gains and all of those things would be futile. And I feel like we're accomplishing that, and we're accomplishing that because we have a wonderful team of teachers and a staff at the schoolhouse. But the feeling is a feeling where our boys are understanding their value. They are understanding their worth. They are understanding their potential to contribute to their families, to our community, their aspirations around college and beyond. And it all starts with the acknowledgement and the celebration of the inherent value of each human life.
And to the rest of you, I'm sorry for picking Neil first. Matching, Aisha, matching.
Challenge, I tell you, Tom. So whenever I have these opportunities to connect with other thought leaders and share with people in the community about the wonderful opportunity that is Springboard to Opportunities, I'm always really humbled. And I'm humbled because I understand that the successes that my organization is having, the successes that I am having, are really not about myself nor Springboard. It really is about the families that we serve. It really is about changing the dynamics and changing systems. And so it's a beautiful thing to see unfold and to watch manifested right before you when you recognize that your life's work is the answer to someone's prayers. And it's truly what Springboard is, and it's truly what my purpose in this space is. And so this is always really humbling, and I always think about my family and my upbringing and why I'm so passionately committed to this work, because it's not work, it truly is my family's legacy. And I'm so committed to the 2-gen aspect of this work because I've seen how it can work not only in a generation, but how it can immediately work. So just a little about my story, since we're talking about single stories and the danger in that story. You know, I'm from Mississippi. So for those who've not been to Mississippi, you are invited, come to Mississippi. And so it's an interesting place to live. But my grandmother was born, and she was a sharecropper. So born into poverty in the Mississippi Delta, which was 50 years ago, the poorest region in this country. So my grandmother got pregnant, dropped out of school, and because of access to a relationship, they gave her access to a program. It completely changed the narrative, not just for her, but for her kids and for her kids' kids, and now for those individuals that we all work with, because we are a family of servants. And it's all about service leadership, which is why the Ascend Fellowship is so phenomenal. It allows you to live out your values, and you can wear them on your chest, and you do not have to hide them and say, you know, I work on purpose and it is okay. You all should try to do that as well, because it's amazing when you get to show up at work every day knowing that your work matters and your work is immediately making a difference. And sometimes, you know, it's really difficult doing this work, and people say, oh, what are your impacts? What are your results? You're not touching 50,000 lives. You're not moving big systems. I may not be touching 50,000 lives immediately, but the one life that I touch today is touching another life, is changing the narrative for that young person, which is changing the narrative for her family. So I am excited, and I continue to be honored that I get to sit in this space, and as long as I get to sit in this space, I am going to advocate for the least among us, because I too understand that because of my faith, to whom much is given, much is required.
Thank you so much. Anne?
Remarkable. It's clear to me that this is a calling. This is a moment, and it's our opportunity to be a force for good and lasting change that deserves no less than our best. No less, no moment wasted, no opportunity missed to impact lives for good. And thank you for your seat and your presence and your actions and your will, because there will be change, there will be impact lasting.
Great, thank you. William?
Yeah, I drew the short straw to go last after these amazing people. So let me dig deep. I was up late one night watching television when I should have been working on my dissertation. Yeah, I took forever on all my degrees, 6 for the undergraduate, 4 for the master's, and 8.5 years for the doctorate. Started working my 3rd year in college and haven't stopped since. I was watching a movie. I don't even remember what the movie was, but it was a way to not work on my dissertation as my wife and son slept. As I was working on the movie, watching the movie rather, at the end of the movie there was a quote by one of my heroes, actually my biggest hero, which is the late Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa. And the quote just resonated to me. And so if you ever receive an email for me, and I know the millennials in the room, it's old technology, but I still send emails. I tweet too, but I still send emails. And I have a tagline at the end of my email, and it's by Nelson Mandela. And there's all kinds of taglines, and I've seen people have some that are really deep, like Question Everything by Albert Einstein. Some that are quite humorous by, for instance, behind every successful man is a surprised woman. My wife and mother would agree, but that was actually by the former wife of Prime Minister of Canada. And so the quote that came up at the end of the email that just continues to be what's on mine, I don't think it'll ever change. And this room really inspires me because it's reflective of this room. The quote was, "Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. You can be that great generation." For us to solve the problems that we face, intergenerational poverty, it's going to take a generation like the faces that I see in this room to step up to be that great generation, to ensure the prosperity and future for our children and ultimately for this nation. So go out and be that great generation.
Great. Thank you all. Wow. That's good. Okay, so we will do Q&A until Sarge says no. Those of you who've seen me do this before know my little shtick here. I went to church Sunday morning, I got my sermon. So let's have questions if we can.
You are so inspirational, and you are so remarkable in what you're doing. What I keep thinking about is that behind everything that you do is this horrible statistic of 3rd grade reading level failure. So all of you are involved in education in some degree or another, making people's lives better. You've got this awful nationwide problem of illiteracy. So how do you go from there? I mean, you obviously are, but it just keeps sticking in my mind how difficult your task is, almost insurmountable, even though you are surmounting it. I don't know how.
All right, how do you do it? Anyone?
You partner. There's a higher ed for a long time would look at our colleagues in K through 12 and say, well, you're not giving us college-ready students. And they turn around and say, well, you're producing our teachers. You can't, it has to be a partnership. We have to say, here's what the data shows. How do we work together to change the data? How do we work together to invest, to ensure that we have third grade reading skills. The United Way in El Paso, I'm a board member for the United Way in El Paso, and their key function is to ensure third grade reading levels and literacy levels. And so we have to partner on this. How do we work together to stretch the pennies and the dollars that we have to ensure that we're changing those? And it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. This is a long-term project.
All right, Neil?
What I would say is that I love the urgency of that statistic and the action that it spurs. I do not like the finality of it. In our school, we have people in 4th and 5th grade who are not reading at 3rd grade level. So what is it that we're to do? Are we to say, well, too bad, too late? Absolutely not. We would never do that. We think about the other ways, one, the ways that we can accelerate their learning to hopefully get them to a point where they catch up. But the other thing we do is we think about all of the other ways that virtues manifest themselves in who we are as people and professionals that go beyond academic content. What kind of people are our schools helping to create? What kind of virtues are we helping to instill so that when there are academic deficiencies, that's not a write-off, that doesn't mean that there's a student who can't be a wonderful contributor to his or her family, to their communities. Obviously, it goes without saying we want all of our children to be academically on par and beyond their grade levels. We know realistically that that's not going to be the case immediately. What do? We have to take a broader view of what it means for them to be successful, how we inspire them, how we help them identify passions, pursue those passions so that they can continue to cultivate self-worth, even if they aren't where they need to be academically. We have a lot of children in that category.
Great, thanks. Next.
Neil, to keep you on the hot spot, the Visible Man Academy, which is a charter school, I assume started because you saw a need. You have the ability to get a buy-in from parents because when they bring their boy there, you require the buy-in. Without putting yourself out of business, is it possible for the public education system to replicate that experience?
So not only do I think it's possible, I think it's incumbent upon our public schools education system to think more broadly about this idea of a positive attachment to school. I think one of the greatest things that frustrates me, and I can certainly speak for our team at VMA, we have used the word unacceptable for so long that some of our outcomes clearly have been acceptable, right? We have, for some reason, in a society that celebrates differentiation and options and different forms of delivery in every aspect of our business world, our consumer market. There's something about education that causes us to feel that we have to be very, very prescriptive and limited in how we deliver an educational experience. One of the reasons we exist is to say that there has to be a wide range of school experiences, as there are a wide range of students and their experiences. So we need to create just a vast array of options for what school can look and feel like. So when we do our work as part of a public education system, we hope that any favorable results we see, that those can be adopted and replicated in larger public school environments. We recognize that we don't have the hundreds and the thousands enrollment that many public schools and our neighboring public schools have, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some philosophies and some approaches that could apply, just as we learn from the public schools and neighboring schools, things that they're doing well that benefit us as well. So we hope that can be the case.
Great, thank you. Kristen?
Hi, Ashley Brown. I work for the Women's Resource Center, so we work with more of the adults. And I'm going to give Neil a little break. The transition with the state of Utah to go to truly that common sense and policies that aren't working. How long did that transition take? And can you give us a little bit of that background?
Thank you. We are living it, and so it is an ongoing experience. And it was just about 4 years ago that actually a state senator took the time and called out the state bureaucracy to distinguish between situational poverty and intergenerational poverty. So it was very intentional, and he came from a position of a lifetime of mission work and experience throughout the world, and wanting to make a difference in his state, and recognizing that too many taxpayer dollars and too many programs continue to just perpetuate a result that was not good enough. And created in statute the Intergenerational Poverty Commission, created in statute the expectation for annual reports on the intergenerational poverty needle moving. And now that being said, all of that looks fabulous in black and white in journals and publications, but the reality is every day I'm learning how to advance this further and further, and it is a work in progress. And it's already been referenced here this morning, and I think it bears repeating, is the sense of urgency that fuels our short-term action, that fuels our ability to say, stop this service today, let's channel the resources toward the solutions that matter for tomorrow. That, and that doggedness is a motivator. Now, at the same time, our vision has to be also a shared commitment to sustained impact, to sustainable change, not just the flash, not just the, did you hear what Utah's doing and their statistics and their change? But I want to be sure that the younger sibling of the individual whom we are serving today, when they become a parent, what is the experience for his or her child? So it's both the policy and practice change with urgency and insistence today, with an appreciation for what will be sustainable for the generations years to come. And that's why I'm such a believer in localized effort, community-based, community-driven appreciation and ownership for the change that we're trying to seek to interrupt the cycles of poverty.
Great, thank you. Got one over here.
Hi, I'm pretty new. My name is Ashley Coon, and I'm pretty new to the two-generational programming. Thanks to John and Neil, who I've heard, I've met with him and learned about his programs. And I'm in love with the thought of two-gen programs, but I'm from a rural community, and there's generations of poverty. What do you do for the complacent adult? I mean, if they are fine with where they are, and if their kids grow up to achieve just what they have achieved, which isn't a lot, what do you do with the complacent adult? Is there a time when two-generational programs just don't work? Or is there something that you can do to make people want more out of life?
Well, that's a good question.
That is a good question. That's a very good question. Thank you for that. And I am going to challenge you to understand there's no such thing as a complacent adult. There are people who are broken because of the lack of opportunity that exists within their community. So in that regard, it just takes time. And it really does take those relationships, and it takes building a culture of trust. And that's where you have to start. And that is not something that happens overnight. That really is with you showing up and being accountable and being approachable and being accessible. Some of my favorite times with this work is when Springboard was first starting, and it was going into myself, because at the time I did not have a staff. It was a staff of one. It was she. So the showing up in those communities and developing those relationships with individuals who did not believe it was possible, had never actually had a positive interaction with someone who was a service provider, because in a lot of instances, those transactions are really negative. And so you just have to show up, and you just have to keep coming and building relationships and being transparent. And I just can't say that enough. And that does not happen overnight. But once the light bulbs do go off, and once you do have the aha moment, it's beautiful. And it is something that will never be lost. But it is a lot of work that you have to do on the front end in order to make that happen. So just get in there and get started. Yeah.
Karen Winden, Manatee County Government. We heard from 4 really spectacular programs in 4 disparate areas of our country. If we could magically poof you all down into our community tomorrow, what would be your first action, your first outreach, your priority to build that community, that relationship, and to leverage those programs?
So I'll take a shot at that. I don't know if you've picked up on, I poofed myself to the state of Utah not having known a soul. I was born and raised in southern Louisiana and had experience in state government and the nonprofit sector. And so with some familiarity, I began by inviting those around me, inviting the experts, and that means the family, the youth, the service providers, the teachers, the principals, and listen. But all together. I'd like to convene a stakeholder group, I said to the staff. Well, which stakeholders? The aging community? The early childhood community? The housing community? No, I'd like to convene stakeholders. The faith community, I'd like to convene all of the stakeholders with my crazy accent, and I'm gonna throw out words like lagniappe, and living on the edge, because big change, I wanna make big change, big impact, and now there's urgency. The time is insistent that we act now, and the only way we can have the kind of impact we seek to make is to do it together. And I love that Aisha mentioned transparency, to be incredibly transparent with motive. So, what was my motive? I want to impact intergenerational poverty. Period. The end of story. Now that you know my motive, let's talk about how we work together to make that happen. Thank you.
Okay, good advice. Anybody else? William?
Sure. So, yeah, I'm not originally from El Paso. I was born and raised in the southern tip of Texas in Brownsville. But essentially my whole life has been on the border, save the 6 years that I was in College Station working on undergraduate. El Paso has a inferiority complex that people use El Paso as a stepping stone. So it's very similar, coming into a new community. I needed them to know that I was vested, that I wanted to be there, I chose to be there. People say, oh, you're going home to visit family. And I say, no, I'm going to South Texas to visit family. El Paso's home. So I sit on 6 or 7 local boards. I sit on a few state boards and then on a couple of national boards, but I needed the community to know that I was vested. And so who would I meet with first? Well, there's 2 constituencies. We have to make this a seamless pipeline. It should be pre-K through 16. And so that means meeting with your K through 12 counterparts, showing them an appreciation that you understand that they are by far your most important constituent. Those students are coming to us, and it's key to make sure that they come immediately after high school graduation. The data is very clear that if a student waits more than a year to enroll into higher education, their likelihood to complete a credential is less than 10%. So if they don't go straight through, and then the partnership with our sister university, you have to have that partnership to understand that my expectation's high for my students as well. I don't want them to stop with an associate's degree, go on to complete a baccalaureate degree. And so we have to have those relationships. And so my first meeting in El Paso before I started was with Dr. Diana Natalicio, the president of UTEP, because she's my most important partner. And so she wasn't going to be there. I started August 1st, 2012. She was going to be out of town. So I had my assistant schedule the meeting for the Friday before and went into the office before I was working to make sure that I met with her and ensured that, I want to enhance the relationship that we already have. I want to do more. I want to do it faster.
Great. One more question, I think.
My name is Sandra Terry from Laurel Civic Association, and I'll have to apologize to John and to Tom. This is not a question. Good thing it's last. I just want to say thank you to you guys up there, and I hope everybody was listening so that they understand that everybody's not okay, and they're not going to get okay by themselves. It's going to take a village. It's going to take a community. This county is good at collaborations, but like you said, if it doesn't work, stop doing it. Listen with your head and your heart, not your eyes and what somebody else tells you is going on. You gotta listen from within those people. So I just want to say thank you, because this is really, I know you said you had your sermon, but I'm glad I came here today because I needed to know that people like you exist. Thanks.
All right. All right. Consider yourself forgiven, Sandra. Thank you. That was inspiring. Thank you so much. Y'all were great. Thank you for being here, for your time and your passion and your commitment, and for tolerating me for an hour. Thank you much.